Hey, what's going on, guys? This is HB. You're tuned to the 5.3 stat scaling video. This is very new material, just got implemented a few weeks ago, and in the lower level brackets, people are just figuring out how it works and the concept. But for those of you who don't know what this is, I'm going to introduce it to you. If you join a BG now, if you are not the top level of the bracket, so for instance in the 15 to 19 bracket, if you're anything lower than 19, your gear is going to scale to as if you were 19. Well, for BOAs that is, your BOA gear will scale as if you were 19. Now, for your other pieces of gear, the math behind that is you take the top level of the bracket, so for 19, you do 19. In my case, you do minus 16, because that's the level I am outside the BG. And when I join the BG, all my gear is going to get an increase of 3 item levels. Now, this is where the interesting part comes. Some of the gear at level 16 is better than the gear at 19, making it possible for a 16 Twink to be best in slot, rather than a 19 Twink, if they have the moves that they need at the level 16 or at 18 or whatnot, whatever level you choose. Now, why would you use this? Basically, what I would like to call these lower level Twinks are super Twinks. If you've heard of a glass cannon set before, it focuses on high crit or high spell power, but usually has low HP. What the 16 Twinks offer is when you join a game, you have this really high crit, so this is my crit outside the BG. In the BG, it's going to look around like 30%, 32%. It drops a little bit, and I'll get into that later. But you have very reasonable health, around like 1400, 1500 health, which is really manageable. That's right around what other boomkins are at this level. Now, why would you use this? I think we broke that down. For if your class has the moves available at a lower level, I wouldn't go any lower than 16 in my opinion, but I have seen some rogues go 15 in the 19 bracket, and they seem to work out well. But for most classes, I would stick to 16 and above if you're going to go with one of the lower levels. I would do this because there's some gear that scales better than 19. For instance, when you join a BG, Godfrey's Breeches, which right now are 7 stam, 5 intellect, and 5 crit, they scale up to 9 stamina, 6 int, and 6 crit. And many items do this. They'll scale up gear-wise, and you'll get extra stats that aren't there at level 19, but they are at a lower level. So basically, is what you're looking at is if you have a 19 that has the same gear as a level 16, the stats of the 16 in the BG should be higher than the level 19, because you're getting hidden stats the 19 isn't getting. Your BOAs are matching the 19, and you're getting extra stats from other pieces of gear. Now, the extra stats from other pieces of gear that are non-BOA are pretty random. Some items scale, and some items don't. I haven't really figured out a pattern to it yet, but if you guys figure anything out, please drop a comment, or if you try other classes for yourselves, please drop a comment. I'd love to hear how it goes. This is my first one that I've tried, my level 16 boomkin. But in the second video, we'll focus on which gear scales, and I'll kind of break into that a little more. But before we go there, before we join the BG, let's look at some of my stats here. So, out of the BG, I have 36% crit, which is pretty insane on a caster class, with 62 rating, and I have 166 spell power. My hit, I'm capped for level 16 and 19. And another thing that's super important when making your 16 or a low level Twink, the hit rating has to be capped for a 19. And the spell cap for a 19 is 11 hit rating. If you're capped for level 16 and you join a game, you're going to be missing when you're in the game, because when you go into the game, you're scaled to 19. So your cap is going to be under by a few percent. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is part 2 of the video. We're going to join a Warsong Gulch, and I'll show you how some of the gear scales and why you should choose your classes, and also how you should choose your classes when making these lower level Twinks. So I joined an XP on game because it's off times for 19 right now, and it's going to be a lot easier for me to explain. Now, if you're watching the first part of the video, obviously we kind of went through the crit and the spell power, and I was at 166 spell power, I believe, and 36% chance to crit. Now, while you look at my stats right now, obviously my spell power went up by 15, which is a really good chunk, and also my health went up by about 200. This is what I was talking about, where you have some manageable health. I'm right around 1400 health, and my crit percentage dropped, but my crit rating went up by 8, and that's just because I got some extra crit from some of my pieces of gear, my BOAs, but because I'm a level 19, my rating, or my percentage drops a little bit because it scales as if I were 19. Now, let's look at some of the gear that scales and which doesn't. So, as I said before, you look at the Tattered Dreadmist Mask, which is a BOA, and it scales as if it were a 19 item. And here's some of the other BOAs. I don't have the leather ones at the moment, kind of working on it, but they got the same base stats as the leather. There's the staff, scaled to 19. The trinkets, both 6 in elect. Now, let's look at some gear here. Wild Rider's gloves. Now, this is what I was talking about when I said some gear scales and some doesn't. Now, you can look at the item level. It's an item level 17, and it is increased by 3 because I'm a level 16. So there's the math, the added 3 levels. But this piece of gear specifically does not scale. It's really random. I figured out that just in my case scenario, most of the 17 gear, item level gear isn't scaling. You can see Merger Boots doesn't scale at all either, or uninsured bracers. But let's look at something that does scale. So Vigorous Belt of the Bandit, with the extra 3 levels, it gets an added crit rating, an added stamina, and an added agility. So this is our added stats that are not available at 19, but you can get at a lower level. So this makes it possible to get extra stats, like I was saying before, or hidden stats that are more beneficial to your class at a lower level.
Scatter shot.
Some of the other gear that scales, Godfrey's Breeches, so that guy I was talking about in the first video, with the extra stats. Stendhal's go up to 6 crit. Noble's Robe gets an extra 2 crit rating. Tiger's Eye Necklace goes up to another spirit. It gets 3 spirit. And this brings to another interesting point. For many classes, spirit can work as hit. So when you're looking at that, it helps you manage your hit cap better than a level 19 when you're getting extra spirit from certain slots. Now I'm just going to go through my bags here, and you guys can take a quick look. I'll also have some screenshots of some of the gear. So as I'm going across here, we can see that some of the gear is scaling, for those of you who are familiar with the 19s, and some of the gear is not. This is pretty much at random. As you can see, some of the dungeon gear is scaling, but other pieces aren't. And it's really interesting, I would say. This is very new material.
Shot.
I think that the community should really get involved to try to figure out which gear scales and which doesn't. But it's definitely worth looking into. I would encourage people to make 16 or 15 Twinks or whatever level.
Trinketed.
But I mean, what harm can come from it? It's a good experience. If you really don't enjoy being a level 16, you think it's not good for your class, or you just find yourself missing the moves, you can always level it to the top end of the bracket. There's really no harm in trying it out. And I think it's better for certain classes. Some of the classes I would suggest are Ellie Shamans, Rogues. I haven't decided whether I like my Boomkin or not yet. Obviously I have the really high crit, but I am missing Sunfire, which I was aware of when making the Twink. But I wanted to see if it would do well without Sunfire. I haven't really decided yet. The spread damage isn't there, but the burst is. It's a ton of burst. Now in summary, people, you just got to go out there and try it
Hello,
yourselves.
Justice.
I know a few people have already gone out in the bracket. I think there's probably less than 10 though in the 15-19 bracket who have tried making these lower level twinks. But we'll only learn more from the more people who go out and try it themselves. This has been it for the 5.3 stat scaling video. I hope you enjoyed and learned a thing or two about how it works. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me in-game on Bleeding Hollow, on any of my tunes, The Nightman,
Trinketed,
Shamrock, Shamcock,
Scattershot,
or H-Burst. Also drop a comment if you have a question. With that being said, the 5.3 stat scaling video is over. Make sure to tune into the podcast for Word of the Gulch with me and Yubi. We'll be doing 19 podcasts every 2 weeks, so stay tuned to that. Our next podcast is going to be featuring 19 arenas, and I'm very excited to talk to you guys about that. But see you next time, and have fun out there in the Gulch.